Okay, and what we're gonna do now is we're gonna investigate how to use chain rule. So chain rule basically says that if you have one function composed within the other, so this is f of x composed inside g, then the derivative is the outer function with the inner function plugged in times the derivative of the inner function. And the best way to understand this rule here is by going through a bunch of examples, okay? So we need to kind of just be able to see the inner function and then the outer function. So in this first example, right, what would be the inner function? The inner function, what happened? The inner function would be, oh, that's why. The inner function would be something like, how do I get it? Sorry. The inner function would be this one right here. We should see that this is the inner function and the outer function is this 5 part, right? So the inner function is this x squared plus 1. And we kind of neglect that for the time being. And we say, well, what would the derivative of this yellow brick to the 5th be? Well, it's just a function to the 5th, and we know that then it would be 5 times the yellow brick, that's our x, to the 4th, right? I just used power rule. I brought down the 5 to the front, and then I diminished the exponent by 1. Chain rule says that then you have to multiply by the derivative of whatever you neglected. Okay, and what did we neglect in this case? We neglected x squared plus 1. So, since this is the case, we neglected x squared plus 1. This is the inner function, right? So, this is x squared plus 1 right here, that yellow brick. Now I need to find the derivative of x squared plus 1. It's going to be 5 x squared plus 1 to the 4th times the derivative of x squared plus 1 is the derivative of x squared plus the derivative of 1. The derivative of x squared is 2x. The derivative of 1 is 0. And now you're done. Now you just got to simplify. This 2x combines with the 5, 10x times x squared plus 1 all to the 4th. And this is h prime of x. Okay, so we can do it again with this one, but this one, so practice this with examples like that one. You could come up with a whole bunch, right? You could sit here and you could say, let's do maybe another, I don't know, simpler one maybe, x squared plus 2. No, it's just as difficult, 6, right? Let's say I had some function, I don't know, k of x, right? Well, what is it? The inner function is this one. The outer function is the 6th, right? It's like u to the 6th. What's the derivative of u to the 6th? 6 u to the 5th times, by chain rule, you have to multiply by the derivative of the inner function, which I called u, k of x prime. And then now, what's the what is u? U is this x squared plus 2 thing. So then I've got this times the derivative of x squared plus 2 is just 2x. And then I get 12x x squared plus 2 to the 5th. And then that is my answer. Okay, go and justify these two of the simpler variety for chain rule. Now, it could get a little bit more tricky because what they like to do is they like to make you do a chain rule within a chain rule. So we need to then, similarly, find and identify the inner function. So the inner function here is this whole thing. So think of that like u. What's the derivative of u to the 6th? It's 6 u to the 5th. And then by chain rule, you have to multiply by the derivative of u. So now go back, write everything. Forget about the fact that you wrote everything in terms of u. It's 6 times x to the 3rd minus 1 squared plus 9x to the 5th, because this is u, right? This whole thing was u, times the derivative of this whole inner part, plus 9x derivative. And I'm putting that prime there because I'm not done. I still need to find out what this is. So now what is that? Well, if you look at this one, right, I'm trying to differentiate just this now. Trying to differentiate just this now and replace this with its derivative. I already have this part. This part is good. This part's going to be in the final answer. But now I got to find the squiggly part. So how do I find the derivative of this? Well, I should know that it's going to be the derivative of this plus the derivative of 9x. The derivative of 9x is easy. That's just 9. Take your time and see that. But the derivative of this one, right, I could square it, I could FOIL it out, and I could find out the derivative. But it's much easier to use chain rule again. So I call this whole thing on the inside u, it's u squared. And then what's the derivative? 2u times u prime. But what took the role of u here? U is x cubed minus 1. So it's 2 times x cubed minus 1 to the 1, right? This was u to the 1. And then times u prime, that says u prime, times the derivative of that inside value, which is 3x squared. And then the derivative of just net minus 1 is 0. So then I get that this is 6x squared. X cubed minus 1 plus this part here, the derivative of 9x is just 9. And now I found the derivative of this second part. And you put these things together. So finally putting everything together, you could have done this on the side. If I had more space, I would have done it on the side. You put these things together and you get 6 times x cubed minus 1 squared plus 9x to the 5th times the derivative of this inside. The derivative of the inside is 6x squared times x cubed minus 1 plus 9. And then you put it in the closed bracket because it's times. And then you're done. This is your final answer. Okay. Now, this last one I'm going to do fairly quickly, but it basically involves the same thing that we've been doing, right? This time, the inner function is this 4x, and the outer function is cosine x. So it's just going to be cosine u. Think of it like cosine u. What's the derivative of cosine u? Negative sine u, but you have to remember to multiply this whole thing by the derivative of u. And that will be your answer. What is it in this case? So u, remember I made 4x, and then the derivative of 4x, convince yourself that it's 4. So at the end of the day, all of this will just simplify to negative 4 sine 4x. Negative 4 sine 4x. Okay, and this is your final answer. Okay, we would need to know that the derivative of cosine is negative sine, and we would need to know that the derivative of 4x is just 4, okay? That shouldn't take too long to justify.